Welcome to another episode of Crafty Brewers Tales Behind Craft Beer, the podcast that will increase your enjoyment of craft beer and your admiration for the people who create it. On this episode, we go from grain to glass with Goldfinger Brewing Company in Downers Grove, Illinois. We're going to dissect a beer myth, and as always, we will shine a harsh light on bad customer behavior. As ZZ Top once said, I am beer drinker and hellraiser Brian Noonan, and all my opinions are strictly my own for good reason. Behind the camera is our executive producer, Cody Goff. He may be tardy, but he knows what he's up to. And with me, as always, she is the high priestess of hops, the matriarch of malts, the femme fatale of fermentation, the siren of suds. She's the co-owner of Exit Strategy Brewing, Katherine Vallow. Hello.
Hey, pal. How are you?
I am good. I am very excited for today and our guest, Tom Beckmann. He is the owner and the brewer here at Goldfinger Brewing. Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
This is exciting. So many questions.
Yeah, I'm going to start with one because this is a very important one. Ready? Is James Bond somewhere on site? Do you have some kind of a fluffy cat also around, and do you expect him to die?
Unfortunately, no to all those answers.
God damn it!
Oh well.
You know what?
Thanks for coming, Tom.
And bye. No, that was my Goldfinger question for today. Sorry, Goldfinger.
How many times do you get those?
Is it all the time?
Oh yeah,
every
it's either
minute of every
that
day?
or about the ska band, which I actually do like Goldfinger the ska band.
Oh, is there a ska? I didn't know there was a ska
Yeah.
band named Goldfinger.
How about that?
Very
That's
nice. Well, we're going to have a lot of questions about the beer. Maybe another 007 question. Who knows?
Yeah.
But before we do that, we always try to debunk or cement a beer myth.
Yeah.
And as a guy who has heard many beer myths and has drank many beers, but I'm not in the business, I have heard that tap beer is always better than canned or bottled beer.
This is one of those myths that is so subjective. I don't know if we can even call it a myth. We can call it a talking point, right?
All right.
So the idea that draft beer is always going to be better than anything you will get in a can or a bottle, again, super subjective. And there's a number of reasons why. One of them has to do with draft systems and draft lines. You can, in fact, not keep your lines clean enough.
Okay.
And in some cases, and everybody's been there, everybody's been at a bar that maybe your feet stick to the floor and maybe the beer that you have tastes a little bit like soap. Like, we've had everybody, if anyone was 21 and at a bar, they've had this.
But
right?
At 21, you drink so much you forget that it tasted like soap.
Some of us. I was good.
I was not.
I was good. So in that case, we've already busted. I mean, we're already
Sure.
In debates about it. So draft would not be better in that case. In a lot of cases, I also believe that draft is better because you're getting a more human experience when you are at a tap room and it's coming from a draft line or it's coming from a cool draft system that is purposefully designed to pour a beer in a very, very certain way.
Ah, wait a minute. Are you talking about present company?
I am!
Because when I came in, I was looking, you can see the taps right behind us here at Goldfinger. Tom, your draft system is specially designed because we won't bury the lead. Goldfinger is a lager-focused brewery.
That's correct.
So tell us, because the beers came out, and you'll see they had a perfect 2 fingers of head, which goes back. And this was, so there's a lot of questions, but explain your draft system and why it's special to your beers.
Sure. I think it all starts from the fact that we are just a lager producer, and in the industry that is looking for like new things constantly or wild things about beer, we needed something to make lagers look cool. And because lagers generally are boring to most people. And part of that is the whole culture behind lager drinking. In the Czech Republic especially, like, you could go into a bar in Prague and you don't have to say a single word to the bartender. You just have to give a nod and use your coaster, and you could drink couple liters there without ever exchanging words with them. And it's all done by this whole culture of just like body language and the fact that, you know, you're not there trying to look for some crazy weird beer. It's like we just have a couple beers, and you're going to, if you do this nod, you're going to get that one. If you do that nod, you're getting another one, and that's done.
And this is amazing.
And they're all, I mean, the purpose of that, correct me if I'm wrong, is they're all high quality.
Yes.
And you're not chasing. So you come in, but when you brew specialized beer, when you brew lagers, is the tap system different than if, I don't know, any other kind of beer?
Not necessarily. You can pour lagers out of any draft system, but for us, we wanted to have the total control over how we present our beers. Mm-hmm. And with any beer, foam is especially important to deliver, you know, the aromatics. That's where most of the aromatics of the beer are present. And as it's popping out of the glass, like that's going to be the first, actually the second impression you'll get. The first is the visual.
Yeah.
So we select special glassware for each type of beer, and we pour each beer according to what we think will deliver the exact image that we had in our minds as we developed the recipe.
Something you told me, because I commented on that when I first walked in, the tap system. There's a difference with the foam. You said your system creates a wet head, which is a term I had never heard about. Can you explain what that is?
Sure. In order to achieve that, you have to have our, they're called LUKR side pull faucets. They're out of the Czech Republic, and they have, in the tip of the faucet, they have this micro screen. So the way that faucet functions is very much like a ball valve, like the same kind of ball valve you have in your house and your plumbing.
Okay.
But versus like a standard faucet, which is essentially an open or close, like a plunger style.
Yeah.
So this, you can control how much actually comes out at once, very finely, and then depending on how you control that aspect, as the beer passes across the micro screen, it creates a certain turbulence that helps kind of mix in more beer into the foam. So just visually, it looks shinier than your average foam if you were just to pour the beer, and that's because there's a lot of beer in there, and it makes it really pleasant to drink. In fact, in the Czech Republic, as sort of a digestif after a long night of drinking, many people will literally just order an entire glass of foam.
Really?
And just chug it. And it's called a milk pour.
That's interesting.
That's a secret menu item here.
Wow.
What is the
You're
nod
like In-N-Out
for that?
Burger,
Yeah,
where we can
exactly.
get the secret
the
menu.
nod? We need the nod. The nod for
what's
like a
our
milk
what's the
drink.
body language for the milk pour? Mhm.
We haven't developed that yet.
All right,
but
we'll work it out.
We'll work
You
it
know
out.
what?
I have a
this.
feeling, Katherine, that this episode is going to play up to your love of science.
Oh, I'm so excited.
Because there's a lot of questions that
So
are
many
gonna be
questions. But
science-based.
side pull systems are some of the coolest that are out there in the industry because of what they do with flow control when you are pouring a beer. And this, just going back to today's myth, this myth we cannot bust. We can confirm this myth. So especially here in this beautiful space, we confirm that draft beer is in fact better than packaged.
Yes, come here.
You know, it
Yeah.
just really is.
Come
Come here to get a side pull.
Thank you. And let me reintroduce our guest today. Tom Beckmann is the owner and the brewer here at Goldfinger Brewing Company. They're at 513 Rogers Street, Downers Grove, Illinois, goldfingerbrewing.com, and you can follow them on all the socials at Goldfinger Beer. There's so many places that we want to start with you, Tom, but I'll start with, since we're talking about the wet head and the pour and stuff, you brought us out 3 beers that you had said was a slow pour.
Yeah.
Which, again, if I go into a bar, usually they're, you know, even a brew pub, a tap room, they're pouring it correctly, but it's let's go.
Yep.
What is a slow pour, and is that why this had that beautiful head on it?
Well, it's funny because now we're going to have to switch countries because
all right.
if I were to talk about slow pouring a beer in the Czech Republic, they'd laugh at me. They'd be like, why are you making people wait for their beer?
We do not need the
who are
Czech
you,
Republic
Guinness?
coming after us.
Yeah.
I mean,
We
it
do
does
not.
sound fun, though. We do know that we've grown if the Czech Republic comes
Yeah,
after
if we
us,
get
right?
haters in the Czech Republic,
Woo!
okay,
Around.
that's cool.
Yeah, that's one of the primary functions of the LUKR faucet is fast pouring.
Oh, okay.
you can bang out tons of beers very quickly.
Okay.
But we're talking about a German Pils. That's what we're drinking right now. And it's a little bit of a different experience. German Pils, contrasting with Czech Pils, is it tends to have a little bit lighter body, tends to be a little bit drier, and have a little more of a floral hop character, and have more of a pronounced bitterness that's more of a bite as opposed to kind of a building bitterness that you would find in a Czech Pils. So in our lineup of beers, we don't do a lot of very hop-forward beers. In fact, this one of our core beers is what we would consider our hoppiest.
Okay.
And with that, we wanted to pour it in a way that would deliver the best aroma possible. So we chose to do slow pour, which is just done in 3 separate steps. So essentially, what you want to do is you want to promote the carbon dioxide to start coming out of solution, because carbon dioxide in solution has almost it can be almost borderline tart depending on the context, but it's carbonic acid at that point, and you want to get it to become gas. So to do that, you just let the beer crash aggressively into the glass.
Okay.
That starts to help promote that. You do that for a couple steps. And as you're doing that, you're building this nice little foam cap. And at the very end, you fill the glass with some really clear beer, push that foam cap up, and you have this beautiful, almost like soft serve like
I was going to say it almost looked like Dairy Queen when you brought it out. I was like, "Ooh, where's the little curl?" It was beautiful, just floating on there.
So that's for your eyes, and then you get your nose there, and that's where the hop character is. But the other benefit of that whole process is you actually do kind of taper off a little bit of the carbonation, so it makes it even easier to drink. It's not like as zippy in your mouth.
Yeah, no, it is as smooth and as beautiful as anything I think I've ever had in my life.
It looked beautiful. When you put it down on the table, I mean, it tastes great. When you put it down, I was like, oh, that's pretty. That's just pretty.
Right? So when Tom was pouring these, I went over there and I said, we all have different interpretations of the word sexy.
Yeah.
Mine was that beer.
Beer
it's like
good.
Damn sexy beer.
I would take that beer to prom.
We have the lighting for it.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the prom
I take the glamour
lighting.
shot. Me by some roses.
Mm-hmm.
Part of what makes this so exciting for us is that every brewer comes to beer differently. You are the first brewer that has a heritage dating all the way back to the 1800s, and brewers and brewing machine makers.
Yep.
Tell us about that, because that's fascinating.
Yeah. The namesake has nothing to do with James Bond, even though I think that's probably the best James Bond, Goldfinger.
I mean,
one,
we could talk Bond for yes, absolutely, 100%.
But it's actually a family name. It's my ancestors' name. Back in Poland in the 19th century, they were making brewing equipment, the Goldfingers were, and had a brewery in Krakow. And that's why we have a poster of Krakow hanging on the wall. When you come through the vestibule, all along that wall are newspaper clippings and old artifacts from our brewing history. So the brewery itself is sort of a revival of a lost family tradition of brewing and making brewing equipment, also dealing hops. So actually we have themes of our family's history throughout a lot of our branding. Like every can has a picture of a sample valve from a fermenter, because I actually have a sample valve that was manufactured by the Goldfingers, and it has a plate on it that says M. Goldfinger Krakow. Whoa. And it was found by this guy who brought a metal detector out in the eastern part of Poland, and he dug something up and he posted it on some beer blog, and my cousin who lives in Warsaw was like, yeah, that's my family's stuff. So he sent it to us, and then my cousin gave it to me and my wife for our wedding present.
That's fantastic.
It's incredible. I also have family from Krakow and Warsaw, which is unrelated to this,
awesome.
But it's very cool. Grandma's side,
as well?
grandpa's side.
So cool.
Were they brewers too?
They were not. They were drinkers.
Maybe they drank some Goldfinger.
I
Say,
assume they
probably
drank
had
some
some
Goldfinger because
Goldfinger.
we're going, but yeah, absolutely.
That would be cool.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so the history passed down, and you said it was kind of a lost tradition.
It
So
was, yeah.
it's gone, and then I know you went to school to be a brewer, and you got all your certification stuff. Were you doing something before, and then you decided, you know what, I'm going to get into the family business?
Yeah, I was working as a sales manager in corporate America at the time. And I was living with my younger brother, who's a partner in this business as well. And he and I were home brewing in our apartment in Chicago. And we just got into home brewing because we were like really obsessed with making food from scratch.
Okay.
And we also really liked craft beer. So we were like, why don't we make that from scratch too? Yeah. So at the time, one of my favorite beers was Revolution's Eugene Porter. So
Cody loves Eugene Porter. Cody loves it.
Such a great beer.
It is
Still
a
a
good
great beer. So we set out to make a porter, and it was far, far, far from Eugene quality. It was pretty terrible. But we made it ourselves, so we were like, this is pretty awesome.
Yeah.
It always feels better when you're like, but I made it, and it sucks, but I did it.
Exactly. But at that point, I got really obsessed with brewing. I was running like 1-gallon batch experiments with controls as much as I could control to learn more about each ingredient and the differences that yeast could impart on beer and all the different ingredients. And that was also the time that we had reconnected with our family, and we were starting to discover more and more history of the Goldfingers. And I basically took it as I had this kind of in my blood. Like there's a calling that I'm like, I'm still working my corporate job, but I can't wait to get home and do some other experiment. So it was that point that I decided that for me to get to the level of brewing knowledge to pay homage to our lost history, and especially in lager beer, I would have to get a formal education. There was no way that my 1-gallon batches are going to get me to where I need to be. Right. So then I enrolled in the Domens and Siebel World Brewing Academy. Okay. Graduated in Munich and started working for Lagunitas as a brewer. That was my first professional brewing job after.
Nice. Let's take a sip. You said this is your Pilsner.
Yes.
Correct? Now, the original lager, let's throw some... The day we are recording this, Wine Enthusiast gave you a huge endorsement for your original. What was... It was 92, 95?
98.
98.
Holy shit,
I didn't mean to...
Yeah.
Sorry to shortchange you. So the original, which I had earlier, it's delicious. Tell us a little bit about the Pils.
The Pils is a German style. It's kind of maybe on the eastern side of Bavaria, so it's not quite a North German, which would be ultra bitter. Although we do have that on tap. We did a collab with Surly, and we have a keg of that. We did a North German. But this is more of like a quasi Bavarian Pilsner, so expect floral and some spicy notes from the hops with a nice kind of crackery, but even a little bit of a honey character in the malt. Yeah. That gives not a full body, but there's malt flavor there, and then gets dried out by fairly assertive bitterness, but not like in your face, just more a functional bitterness to dry out.
No, it's an absolutely beautiful Pils, and I think one of the cool things that we talk about too are beer terminology and what characteristics then kind of solidify that terminology. One of the things for me as I was coming up in beer and starting to learn more about beer and talking about it more intelligently, I had a hard time wrapping my head around malty because it didn't mean much of anything. Yeah. And then when I started to talk to more people and try more beers, now I am an ale girl. Ales, saisons, funks, that's like the weirder the better.
I love those too.
I love them so much. Like all of them. Does it taste like a horse blanket mixed with blue cheese?
Oh, yeah.
Right here. However, when we start to talk about a cracker profile and you think about, all right, well, what goes into a cracker, right? And you've got flour and you've got yeast and you've got a little bit of salt and you've got water and you've got these things that are going to create that profile, and then you put them kind of matched verbally with the beer, you get a better sense of what some of the broader beer terminology is in the industry, which I think is so helpful when you're talking to people about it. And you're like, all right, well, it's malty, which is just such one of those big, broad terms that not everybody gets. Because they're like, like a malted milk, like a milk bowl?
Yeah.
Like, no, not a
Well,
Whopper.
like the inside of the inside of the Whopper, not the chocolate.
The inside
outside.
of the Whopper,
Yeah,
right. If
the
you
inside.
like, you
Or
gotta
the
do
powder
whole
that
thing
you'd
of-
add to a milkshake to make
Sure,
a malt.
to make a malt.
That's how, yeah.
Sure, but that's-
right. Biscuits, crackers.
Right.
That makes it.
But we use
that makes it
biscuity when we
easy.
talk about lagers too. Sometimes these like really dry foods that you can conceptualize while you're drinking, which brings out the character of the beer even more, I think.
And going back to what you said about the Pilsner earlier, that you guys consider your hoppiest, there is a little hop note toward the end, but it's not one of those where, the hops. It adds a nice level to it after everything else. So, as we mentioned, you focus on lager. You were at Lagunitas, they do all kinds of stuff. Everybody in the business seems to be chasing all kinds of stuff, and I liked some of the stuff that I was reading on your website. One of the quotes, and I'm paraphrasing obviously, is you guys aren't going to chase different styles just to make a buck. You decided you were going to stick to lager. One, why? And two, it's got to be a source of pride, right? To go, we're not chasing. This is what we do. We do it really well. If you like it, you're welcome. Come on in. Read about Krakow and read about all kinds of stuff. And if you don't like it,
yeah, I think of course it starts with realizing that you're not going to please everybody. And why lager? First, because right around when the Goldfinger's Brewery first opened, it was right when lager yeast had been isolated, and it overtook Europe. So we thought, although we don't have specific recipes, but we have mentions of different styles of beer that they brewed, we thought that these were going to be like the beers that our ancestors brewed. Just so happens that I also love them very, very much. So it wasn't hard to brew those beers. But the other thought was, in particular with lagers, because it's more about nuance. It's more about being very meticulous in the process, and in some certain cases, maybe it's less forgiving as a beer. I mean, other beers are very difficult to make, but when you don't have a lot of very bold flavors, it's more of like a bunch of flavors together. You really got to get that dialed in. And our thought process was, let's not try to do a ton of different beers. Let's take advantage of the fact that we're going to brew these same beers over and over and over again, because every time we brew, we learn something new, or we want to try a different method to round some type of flavor out. And so we have a huge advantage in that, because we only have 6, well, I guess technically we have 7 beers on tap right now, but 6 beers that we brewed here, and 4 of those we brew year round. So we get to keep doing it over and over again.
Well, and that's I like that stance that you said, and it's a quote from you on your website, that if you focus on doing a couple things really well, everybody wins. And so no matter when somebody comes into Goldfinger, if they order the original, it's going to taste like the original.
That's what we try to do. Of course, that's a myth that we should bust. That beer is the same. It's a living thing, just as wine is. But wine gets a pass every year. Beer, it's like, no, I want my beer to be exactly the same every single time.
It is fascinating how wine gets more of a pass than beer. But I think one of the things to touch on too is that beer is a living organic substance. And if you don't understand that, please go back into a brew house with somebody's permission and watch the blow-off valve.
Right.
Just watch a blow-off bucket, and then you can see exactly what's happening, because it's everywhere.
Yep.
It's everywhere all the time. Like, this beer develops. Fermentation is a process.
Or how about right when you get it totally dialed in, and you're like, I've done this now 4 times on the brew house. It's perfect. And then you get a different lot of barley that year that the rain wasn't as great and the protein's higher.
And then wonder exactly what is going on.
What's happening? I do this all the time, and now it's not.
What happened to my beer?
We're sorry. This hot batch didn't get exactly the same treatment as the last one that you got, but because your contract, this is what you get.
Yes.
Cool.
Well, let's get into some of this brewing and some of this science, because I mentioned earlier that there were things about a lagering brewery that I did not understand. I only learned of them today, researching our conversation tonight. All right, so what is a decoction brew house that you're running right over there?
Yeah, decoction is a form of mashing. So mashing is, of course, when you mix the grains. In our case, it's almost always just barley in water, and you go through a series of steps to extract the sugar and other nutrients that's going to set you up for the fermentation. You're essentially creating the food for the yeast to consume, and then they'll give us the beautiful alcohol and carbon dioxide in return. During that mashing process, an old method that was used before you could measure temperature was decoction. So what it involves is you pull off a portion of the thick mash, so that means there's grains mixed in with the water, and you heat that up to boil, and what ends up happening is the sugars that are in there start to explode. And as they explode, they create this sort of depth of flavor, but they also help create the sugars to be more fermentable. And in turn, that fermentation happens. It creates alcohol. Alcohol creates a perceived sweetness, but also a sense of body and roundness. And ultimately, you get this like really nice, round, smooth beer. So we employ this method not in every beer, but in our original lager and in our Vienna of the 4 core. And you can do single, double, or triple decoctions. So you repeat that process 1, 2, or 3 times. It adds a ton of time to your brew.
Oh, I'm sure.
So anytime we do like a Czech beer, which they all do like triple decoctions, we get in super early and don't plan to get home for dinner that night.
Those Czechs.
Wow.
Like, with the head nods and the coasters and the decoction and geez.
I know where my next vacation is.
Yeah.
Okay. You talked about aeration when you were pouring through this system.
Yeah.
But you were also, there's some specialty aeration of the wort.
You want to get it? You want to get in there? That's getting nerdy.
Okay, right. So
we can do a little nerdy, right? Oh, I know you.
I sit here like this.
Well, yeah.
Tell me more.
Because let's set up why these are different. Because making a lager is a lot different than brewing other kinds of beers.
Sure.
So everything here is a little bit different than you might find at another brewery.
Yeah.
I was going to step on toes real quick, and I'm sorry.
Please do.
I think one of the things as we get into this segment of our chat, something that's interesting to remember is that lagers in general have this reputation of just being very easy beers. They're easy to drink. They're easy to come by. You can find a lot of macro-produced lagers, right? But when you get into a quality lager that requires an enormous amount of skill and science, you are talking about one of the more complicated styles to brew.
Yeah.
I mean, decoction aside.
Listen, how can you leave decoction aside? You must always start with
decoction. Do we want to go down this road?
triple decoct. Yes, we must decoct.
I feel like
everything must be decocted.
I'm now going to make some kind of like rooster-themed shirt. With like the word decoction somewhere on it, right?
Decoction doodle-doo.
That's amazing.
We'll do like a decoction shirt with like a big, bold rooster.
That'll be
moving
nice.
on.
Yes, moving on from our merch meeting.
Sorry. I mean, the ADD brain is a marvelous thing. But I think
there's a good idea there, though.
It's really not bad, right?
You got the creative juices going now.
One side is now fully ensconced in rooster merch, and the other side is on lagers. And we're just right. This is where I'm at right now.
Whole line of rooster merch, Tommy. Come by.
Great.
It's going to be great.
Right. Hold tight. Rooster's coming. When we're talking about lagers and lager fermentation and lager production and things like that, and even aerating and where we've been going, again, interesting and so vital to really bust the idea that these are easy beers. They are not. And their popularity is increased, which means their availability is increased. But not all lagers are created equal. Not everybody has got the science background. Not everybody's got, I'm gazing lovingly at the fermenters.
What's with the vertical fermenter?
Well, we'll get
first we got to aerate the wort, then I got to find out why your tanks are sideways. I don't know what's going on over there.
I'll be over here thinking about roosters.
All right, so why are we aerating the wort?
Yeah, so you always aerate wort, whether you're producing an ale. Well, I guess I shouldn't say always. There are some styles that probably benefit from not doing it, but most breweries are aerating, and aeration happens when you're knocking out the wort that you've just created in the brew house, sending it to the fermenter. You're injecting oxygen into that.
Okay.
And the reason is because you want the yeast colony that you've pitched in there to grow. You want new cells. The new cells are what's going to create the good beer. The old cells are old. They have some off
Kick them to the side.
So.
They're old. They're useless.
Yeah, exactly.
Stop talking about me.
It's rude. So oxygen is vital in that growth. But there's some literature that suggests that just pure oxygen is actually toxic to yeast.
Oh.
And most breweries just buy a bottle of oxygen and inject it.
And kill their yeast.
Yeah.
Willy-nilly.
Very slowly they're killing it. What we are thinking is we're thinking several steps ahead, and we want to keep reusing the yeast. So we want to keep repitching it into the beers, and we want to extend the life of the beer. So instead of injecting pure oxygen, we just use air. We compress it, filter it, and send it through a sterile filter at the end. And so we're just using the air around us to aerate it.
Okay, so that's another unique part of the lagering process that you guys do here at Goldfinger. We're looking here at these horizontal fermentation tanks. I've been in a number of breweries all over the country. I've never seen horizontal tanks like this. Why are they sideways? Did you guys not have room to stand them up straight? What happened?
Well, like I mentioned before, they just fell over when we got. Yeah.
All right. Well, listen.
It was just easier to keep them there.
Why horizontal?
Yeah. There's a lot of benefits to it, but it begins with the yeast behavior. So typically, kind of like overview of the difference between a lager and an ale is the yeast and the behavior of the yeast. With an ale, a lot of the new cells and a lot of the old cells all collect kind of toward the top. And so when you were talking about blow-off bucket, like if you're making a really aggressive IPA and you've pitched that right, like you can come in the next day and that thing's like a geyser coming out.
Everywhere.
Yeah, poison everywhere. So
God.
that's just like the kind of like the crust that's created at the top. So those are also referred to as like top fermenting beers.
Oh, okay. I've heard that term.
And lagers are typically referred to as bottom fermenting beers. Okay. Now, there's yeast in suspension for both of them. So it's not like all the yeast is either at the top or the bottom. But for all intents and purposes, that's kind of the differentiator, and including, temperature. But if you think about a lager yeast hanging out at the bottom, by putting a beer or putting the tank sideways, you're increasing the surface area that yeast that's settled there is in contact with the beer. So these horizontal tanks are referred to as lagering tanks because you're actually conditioning them. We have conical fermenters as well, where we do our primary fermentation.
Okay.
And then we move it into the conditioning tanks, the lagering tanks, and allow that yeast to reabsorb some of the flavors that it's created that we don't want during fermentation, and kind of smooth out the beer. There's another benefit, which is if you picture a really tall tank, imagine the weight that beer is putting onto the yeast that's hanging out at the bottom. Tons of hydrostatic pressure. That yeast is alive, and it's like, what the hell's going on here? This is terrible. Like, I'm suffocating here.
It's like when I sit on Cody after he aggravates me. I just drop right on his chest. He doesn't like it. You need a horizontal. You need to be horizontal next time I drop one on you.
So we don't want to stress the yeast out that way. So we lower the amount of pressure that's sitting on it.
I am feeling like the yeast right now. I am feeling stressed out.
Why?
I don't know. We're talking about sitting on people.
No, listen.
And the last benefit, which we all like, we all love here, in a world of hazy, we love clarity. And
if you definitely see right through
if you think about how if the yeast is all hanging out in suspension, if it was in a tall tank, it'd take a lot longer for all that yeast to drop down. But if you shorten that distance, then you can get clear beer quicker.
Can I ask you?
Yeah.
Okay, so...
No, is this an interview?
No, it's not at all. It's a conversation about roosters. Anyway. So lagering times, as opposed to ale times, considerably longer.
Yes.
Especially if you are in, because I am thinking about other brew systems that use, vertical tanks and are primary top fermenting breweries. It would take up to 6, 7, sometimes 8 weeks to get a lager and to get it actually very clear and beautiful and to be exactly where it needed to be, because it takes time for that yeast to fall out. Is your fermentation time with a horizontal take slightly less or not so much?
Not so much.
Not so much? Okay. It's still, because it's just the other thing to note too that we haven't talked about temperature of fermentation yet either. And they're cold fermenting. They're chilly. These beers don't like to be kept hot.
They're very cold. So they're being kept in sub-zero temperatures right now in the horizontal.
Okay. Like to be very, very cold to do their thing.
It's very cold. So no, actually, for us, on average, our beers take 8 weeks from start to finish. We have certain beers, typically the higher alcohol beers, we like to lager a little bit longer. Let some of that ethanol that was created kind of meld in with all the other flavors. With some of our roastier beers, which, by the way, lagers don't just look like this. They can be big, they can be amber, they can be dark, they can be roasty. But it's a huge realm, and that's what we aim to present here at Goldfinger too. But so it could take a long time.
Yeah. All right. I was just looking at. I was in my head was taking the fermenters and flipping them and kind of understanding. This is a visual, right?
Was there a rooster on one of them?
There's a rooster literally everywhere right now. It's the only thing occupying most of my brain. Right. But yeah, the idea of all right, well, if it's going to take this long and it's this way and this is what's happening to the yeast and this is where the air, and this is the thing. Yeah. Logically, am I shorter if I'm rotating? But no, not even a little bit, because a lager is a lager. It's lager going to lager.
Yeah, it still needs to be.
It's just going to take its time.
But what would likely happen is if you compared the two samples at the same period of time, the horizontal one might be naturally a little bit clearer than the vertical one.
Okay, all right. God, I love learning.
With that, how about we try another Goldfinger core beer?
Sounds great.
All right.
Wonderful. Oh, clap. Clap. And we're back.
All right. Now we each have 3 different styles, but before we sample, Tom, how big is the brewery? And you have some exciting news about an expansion.
Correct. Yeah, we our brew house is 15 barrels.
Okay.
So that'll yield 30 kegs or so. Most of our tanks are 30 barrels, so we have to brew twice to fill those. The smaller ones right here are 15. Okay. But then, the wall behind our brew house is coming down eventually, and we're going to put some more tanks there because one thing that's difficult about making lager beer is you need a lot of storage space because it takes so damn long.
Well, congratulations on that.
Tanks.
Thank you.
I am now waiting for a solid 2 months.
Yeah.
I have nowhere to put the beer.
Exactly.
You must get the beer to the people.
You know what? One of the actual bigger brewer problems that people don't understand, because they do think beer magically falls from the sky.
God,
it doesn't. It does not fall from the sky, but everyone's like, "Ooh, where is it? Is it ready tomorrow?" You're like, "No. When I'm out of room, I'm out of room. When these are full, I got nowhere to put it because I can't force more liquid into a container." Dummies.
All right. Well, let's try. Now, I have the Vienna lager, and this goes back to what you said before, that lagers, friends, can come in all different colors. If you'll notice, the lagers and the pills we had earlier was very clear and golden, and mine is a beautiful amber. And what do you have, Tom?
I have the Dunkel, so it's almost brown.
Yes, and what do you have, Katherine?
I have the Baltic Porter.
So we all have different beers, all brewed at a lager-focused brewery. And they all look delicious.
They're delightful. Yeah. The Baltic Porter is wonderful. And you know what? Now that you've mentioned Delicia, yes. Now that you said the word, I get it.
And I love a good Vienna lager. What makes a Vienna lager?
The Vienna malt.
Okay.
And Vienna malt is going to give it some toasty character, a little bit of caramel character. and typically hopped with Czech Saaz hops. So you get this like nice spicy.
Yeah. It's
finish.
delicious.
It's also one of the better hop names in the world, Czech Saaz.
Czech Saaz hop.
Yeah.
So let's go up in darkness. So the beautiful amber color of the Vienna lager up to the Dunkel, which is another. I'm Catherine's more hops and blue cheese and craziness. I am all about the malt beers. So
that's fair.
What's a Dunkel?
A Dunkel, instead of Vienna malt, you're using Munich malt, and Munich malt is going to give it more biscuit. We talked about biscuit character, biscuit maltiness, but also it has a chocolate, a very subtle chocolate flavor, a little bit less bitter as well. Okay. So it's a little more sweet.
And what about this dark and delicious looking Baltic porter?
Oh, that's one of our pride and joys.
It's so beautiful.
Thank you.
God, it's gorgeous.
We don't make what we consider big beers or alcoholic beers very often here. We pretty much do it twice a year, and it's either the Baltic porter, which is 7.1. So for us, it's like, whoa, that's high.
Almost double some of your other ABVs.
Or it's our Doppelbock that we release in February. But that's a Polish-style Baltic porter. So it's all Polish hops, paying homage, of course, to our roots.
Right.
And
Love it.
It's really cool.
That's beautiful. We say on the show frequently, too, with dark beers and the misconception of dark beers are heavy and they're thick and they're all of these things that are wrong.
Oh, yeah.
That are wrong.
They are not. They are delicious and wonderful and smooth. And if you can drink a cup of coffee in the morning, you can drink a dark beer.
Right.
Like, that's just like, I can't. You can.
Yeah.
You know why? Because you had coffee once in your life.
Close your eyes.
You're good.
Close your eyes. Take a sip. You'll
You're good.
have no
You'll
idea
be fine.
how dark
Right.
it is.
It's so good.
What's the definition of a porter? Because you see porters at a lot of places, and they're all different. So what makes a porter a porter?
Yeah, so ours is a Baltic porter. So what that implies is that it's a porter lager.
Okay.
Typically, when you hear porter, it's an ale.
Yeah.
And it comes from England.
Okay.
So porter, before you could make pale beers, the British actually invented the way to kiln malt, so essentially prep the barley to have maltose to extract sugars from. They invented a method back in the 1800s on how to do it without imparting a lot of color. And that's what revolutionized beer forever. That's why pale beer is the dominant beer nowadays.
Okay.
It was Brits who did that. Prior to that, they were exporting porter beer to all of their colonies. So that's the origin of the porter beer. And sometimes it would be a very strong porter that they would export to Russia, for example, and that ended up evolving into what we know as the Russian imperial stout.
Oh, okay.
So they'd be sending these very strong porter beers to Russia to basically, out of diplomacy, just
please don't kill us.
Yeah,
Have some
exactly.
beer.
And actually, the way that Baltic
That's
porter
what they
came
sounded like, too. They sounded like Fozzie Bear.
It's different back then. The accents were different.
When Fozzie was running
That's
England,
right.
and then
he was
wanted
right
to,
before King Edward III.
or Grover.
Yeah, so it was King Fozzie the First,
Sure, yeah, no,
Fozzie.
obviously.
and he was
Sorry, that one I couldn't help it. I
know.
apologize, man.
That's all right. Why are you apologizing?
But it was because of that process that's how Baltic porter came about, because they were sending porter beer to the Baltic states as well. And the Baltic states at that time were brewing lager beers, but they liked this British porter beer. Okay. So they essentially adapted a porter recipe, but fermented it with lager yeast. So you get what typically characterizes a porter, some roastiness, some chocolate flavors, some malt, but with a nice kind of crispness that the lager yeast imparts on it.
Very nice. Well, we ask every brewer the same three questions. Now, for you, these questions have pretty much already been answered, some of them. Our first question, we always ask the big three. The first one is the hill you'll die on, something you will never brew. Now, we know you are lager-centered, but if you see, you follow the trends, is there one beer, like even as an experiment, because you guys do some small batch experiments, even as an experiment, you're like, not a chance.
That's easy for Goldfinger, IPA.
Yeah! All right, okay.
We're not brewing an IPA.
No brewing. Oh, that's nice. That's why I want to come and sit down here. No IPAs. Have you tried a beer? Have you brewed a beer that was in your style. People may have liked it. Might have been successful, might not have been. But you're like, nah, that one, I'm never doing that one again.
We just had this conversation with the staff the other week when we were all drinking and asking everybody, like, because everybody was drunk enough that they were being honest about which ones they love and which ones they don't.
Best staff meetings ever.
Yep.
It was great. But I think there was a consensus that most of us didn't like this lager that we released. We called it an amber lager.
Okay.
It was literally the same recipe as the Vienna lager, but it was right when Omega Yeast was experimenting with their thiolized yeast.
Yes.
In lager beer. And essentially what it is like, if you genetically modify a yeast, it can pull out more flavors, typically fruitiness, out of raw materials without having to put like fruity hops in it. So we did like 3 beers in that series, and the last one was pitching that yeast in our Vienna lager, and it was, it wasn't great.
All right, it's not coming back. So if you like that one, you're out of luck. You
I'm sorry, guys. I know some
Vienna.
people actually really did, but I'm sorry, it's not coming back.
Come drink the Vienna. All right, and finally, when you're at home, when you're off the clock, could be one of yours, could be something else, your go-to just chill beer. You're just grabbing a beer and enjoying it.
I really enjoy Pacifico.
Nice.
It's my go-to.
It is
Lime or
delightful.
no lime?
Like a good, yeah.
No lime.
No lime. Good man.
Unless I'm eating, and then I'll squeeze some lime on a taco. Put the rest of it in there.
When it becomes a scrap lime, it goes into the beer.
Scrap lime goes in there.
I do like. I started drinking Pacifico when we lived in California, and it's for a big beer, it's really good.
Yeah, it's great.
It's crushable.
I will say it's actually Chris's go-to as well. Like if
Is it really?
Yeah. Like if he's like, I don't want anything. I want beer-flavored beer.
Right.
That's where he's
But
headed.
I want something that can go with
right.
a lot of
he's
stuff.
just like, this is it. This is the thing. All right, well, Pacifico, you know where to find us.
Well, this is a time of the show, Tom, where Katherine likes to turn a harsh light on, as much as I know as a businessman and a brewer, you love your customers. You love the people who come into Goldfinger. They have a couple beers. But in all honesty, some people are jerks. And they behave badly. And that's where Katherine likes to turn her harsh spotlight on them and blast them. Put them on blast, as the kids say.
I do. So today's bad customer behavior isn't one story specific.
Okay.
It is more of a commentary on bad consumer behavior that has started. And it is a phrase that gets under my skin, and it is not the one that both of you think it is, because you both...
Moist.
That's not a phrase. That's like the word from hell.
I could put it in a phrase.
I will end your life.
All right. So what is the phrase?
So the phrase is this. There's a new trend that we've seen in like the vernacular of consumerism that makes my skin crawl and just infuriates me to the point of like being a volcanic eruption. And it is, did not disappoint, which is the most ridiculous way to review anything ever. So here's the thing. During the pandemic, review sites essentially went away because there was a special place in hell for anyone that was going to criticize a small business during the pandemic.
Sure.
That's true.
Sure.
No, right? There was
true.
like a tiny waiting room in hell if you used Yelp during the pandemic.
Well, and you guys opened right
during the pandemic.
Right during the
Yeah.
pandemic.
Right.
So
July
like,
2020.
There was you are a special kind of hellacious human if you used a review site during the height of the pandemic. When review sites came back into play, which no one is excited about because they're back, they're like Google is back and Yelp is back and whatever, they're back. There was a new phrase that entered the collective, and it was did not disappoint. And the thing that bugs me with this as an owner is, did you expect it to disappoint you when you left your house? Because by coming into a business and then posting somewhere on your socials that you were just at Bob's Burgers and it did not disappoint, did you believe when you left that it would, because you are asserting that it didn't? And this is where I land real hard on this, and I cannot be convinced that it is a nice phrase. It is not.
No, the word disappoint is a negative word.
But to say did not disappoint, you're like, well, were you expecting it to? And you're happy that it didn't?
Everybody expects everything to disappoint.
Then why are you leaving your house?
I don't. I come here
Great job,
to do
buddy.
this. No, but I agree with you. Disappoint has negative connotations. So take that out of the thing. There's a lot of ways to say what
Why
I
can't you
think
just say,
they mean.
I really liked it?
I really liked it is the simplest way. Or
I really liked it is the positives. It did not disappoint.
or
Screw you, Karen.
surpassed my expectations. That's still because you might go, I might go somewhere thinking I've heard Goldfinger has good beers. I went there, it surpassed all my expectations.
Okay, how about blew me away instead of even putting I don't know. I get a thing with I expect.
Well, we argue linguistics a lot.
We do, but that's. I have we both have very firm stances.
No, I understand. I understand your point 100%.
Plus, you don't know what would disappoint them,
right?
So then you have no reference.
Right.
So where are your standards?
Well,
so this isn't helping the business by saying did not disappoint.
This is the thing, is you're not doing the business any good when you come out and say did not disappoint, because what you're doing is leading somebody to say in their brain, oh, maybe it disappointed somebody else.
How about?
And now I should probably go and dive down some. I was going to say it and I didn't. I was going to put. No, I'm not.
Say the F word.
I'm not. I don't know when my
Fermentation?
mom is tuning in anymore, so I won't say it. I think she stopped for a while because she doesn't like me swearing. Anyway.
Is there a good context? Like, let's say you went to a place expecting it to be the most incredible place, and it turns out it is. Can you say did not disappoint?
I would say either
lived up to my expectations.
Yeah.
I would just say it was great. All I want to do is give praise
All right,
instead
I'm going to steal this from Bill
instead
Maher.
of metrics.
New rule.
Oh my goodness.
There's two. It was great. It sucked. Those are the only two you can use.
Listen,
there you go.
No, that's easy. It was great.
It's a great black and white hard line, because you can take both of those things and you can work with them a little bit. But at the end of the day, it sucked.
Or it sucked.
Or it was great. And I'd rather go to a place and be like, I'm going to be blown away.
But
and
what if I went to a place that somebody else said it sucked, and I went there thinking it was going to suck, and it didn't suck? Oh my God, it exceeded my expectations.
How about it was just great? It was just great. I had a great time. It was just great. Everything was wonderful. Everything was amazing, because that's going to do more good than this weird thing that's happening with people now, where this is what they like to say. And I just see it so much. And every time I see it, I kind of want to shake the human that's saying it and say, but you're not helping. You're not helping. What you think you're doing is I'm going to throw a nice review out and I'm going to give them 4 stars and I'm going to say it didn't disappoint. It's not helpful. It also doesn't
It's great and it sucks. Those are the only 2 reviews.
It also doesn't provide anybody with any actual information. If you're going to use a wretched, awful review site, use it and provide actual information.
All right, speaking of
great
times.
people should go on Spotify where they can watch and listen to Crafty Brewers Sales Behind Craft Beer, and there will be a poll alongside this episode saying,
stand this.
do you love the phrase do not disappoint, or does it disappoint you? You can go to Spotify now for that.
I love it.
If any of this was mine, I would flip all of it. But I own none of this, so I will not flip. I own
Well, back to
nothing.
Back
My
to
backpack. I will flip my backpack on the way out.
I can't. My hands are tied. There's nothing I can do.
It's
You
the
could
poll
edit
is
it out.
already up.
You could edit it out.
The
You are the
poll's up.
producer.
Our pollsters are always
There's
working.
nobody. There's
the
no poll up.
pollsters are working.
He hasn't done his thing yet.
We're talking about polls and Poland, and our polls are up. It all ties together.
Nice.
And speaking of a great time, we had a wonderful time here at
This is where the show
Goldfinger.
falls apart.
Tom Beckmann
Literally
is the
every time.
owner. He is the brewer here at Goldfinger. Goldfinger Brewing is at 513 Rogers Street in Downers Grove, Illinois. Goldfingerbrewing.com is the website. Read the story. It's fascinating about how they came to be and what they're doing here. And it is a lager-focused brewery, which is fantastic. Follow them on socials at Goldfinger Beer. Tom, it was great. Thank you for having us in your lovely tap room.
It was amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you for all the great
Thank you,
information.
And the beer. Thank you for the beer.
Yes, thank you for the beer.
Of course, thank you.
Join us next time when we go from grain to glass with another fantastic brewer. Crafty Brewer's Tales Behind Craft Beer is produced by Cody Goff, who likes to put up polls just to anger Katherine. For Crafty Brewers.
Wait.
What should they do?
Every time.
Well,
you talk about how they can communicate with us. I'll talk about the other stuff.
Do you know a brewery that you would like to have us talk to? Do you have some bad customer behavior you would like to highlight?
Are you a bad customer?
Are you a bad customer who perhaps will not disappoint? Then please drop us an email, craftybrewerspod@gmail.com. What if they want, I don't know, one of these kick-ass sweatshirts, or they want to know all about us, or they want to follow us on socials?
Yeah. So we are on Instagram. We are crafty_brewers_pod on Instagram. Our website, craftybrewerspod.com, has got all kinds of things. It's got an episode listing, and it's got merch, and it's got a blog. And yeah, it's got the things, and you should go there and you should visit it.
What about reviews? What if people want to review us?
Don't.
All right, don't do reviews.
Yelp.
Don't Yelp us. Don't disappoint. All right, thank you for being here once again, Tom Beckmann. Thank you very much, Goldfinger Brewing. Come out, enjoy some lagers. They are fantastic. For Crafty Brewers, she's Katherine Fallow.
He's Brian Noonan.
Any parting words?
Short girls, big hats, and tall microphones don't mix.